In a dry land, where the sun set the rhythm of the days, a village depended on a single river that flowed in the distance. The water did not come to the houses. It had to be carried. Every day, someone walked to the river, filled a bucket, and returned. It was a simple gesture, ancient, repeated for as long as memory could reach. But one day, something changed. The bucket used to carry the water had a small hole in its bottom. Nothing visible at first glance. Nothing dramatic, just a discreet flaw. When the bucket was dipped into the river, it filled normally. The water rose to the brim, heavy, fresh, and then the walk began. At first, no one noticed the problem. A few drops fell to the ground. Nothing that seemed serious. But step after step, the water leaked out. When the bucket finally reached the village, little remained. The next day, the same path was taken, the same river, the same bucket. Once again, the water did not arrive intact. The conclusion seemed obvious. More effort was needed, so one person walked faster. Another made 2 trips. Another left earlier. Another returned later. The entire village began to revolve around the same idea. Working harder would solve the problem. But no matter how fast they ran, no matter how exhausted they became, no matter how many times they repeated the journey, the bucket kept arriving empty. And no one stopped to look at the bucket because the movement was constant. The effort was visible. The fatigue was real. And when there is so much effort, the system is rarely questioned. Over time, the situation worsened. Because the water was never enough, disputes began. Those who made more trips felt wronged. Those who received less felt forgotten. Those who couldn't keep up were called weak. The problem, which had begun with the bucket, was now blamed on the people. You walk too slowly. You don't try hard enough. You need to wake up earlier. You need to carry 2 buckets. And so the village lived in exhaustion, not because there was no river, not because there was no water, but because of a hole no one wanted to see. As time passed, the leaking bucket stopped being an accident and became the standard. New buckets were made, all with small holes, not because it was necessary, but because the system had adapted to loss. Losing water became part of the process. Then someone had an idea. If the water always leaks, maybe the problem isn't the bucket. Maybe it's the amount of water. So the village began to demand more. More trips, more speed, more production. The logic was simple. As long as there is water, just fetch more. But the more they fetched, the faster it disappeared. And no one realized that the real problem was that nothing was ever retained. This is the moment when the story stops being only about a village, because the leaking bucket is not just an object, it is a system that turns effort into loss, work into exhaustion, movement into emptiness. And the most dangerous thing about this kind of system is not the hole itself. It is the fact that it works just enough to continue. The water never runs out completely. A little always arrives, enough to survive, never enough to rest. And so the village lives in permanent emergency. When someone questions a bucket, the answer comes quickly. That's how it's always been. There is no other way. If it weren't like this, it wouldn't work. But work for whom? The harder people try, the less time they have. Less time to notice. Less time to question. Less time to imagine another path. The leaking bucket doesn't need surveillance. It sustains itself. All it takes is keeping everyone busy. Over time, the village grows. New houses appear. New needs arise. Now it's not just water. it's storage, it's transport, it's exchange. And the leaking bucket multiplies. It appears in tools, in agreements, in work rhythms. Something is always leaking. Time, energy, meaning. People work more than ever, yet feel it is never enough. They produce more, but accumulate less. They run faster, but always arrive exhausted. And when someone finally stops and looks at the bucket, they realize something frightening. The hole was never a mistake. It was planned, because a bucket that doesn't leak allows pause, allows surplus, allows choice. But a leaking bucket demands constant movement. It requires repetition. It requires dependence. It requires a daily return to the river. And that keeps everything turning. But no system that depends on constant leakage is sustainable. The river begins to dry up. People fight over water, over space, over time. And still, the message remains the same. Work harder, produce more, run faster. Until one day, someone asks the simplest question of all. What if the problem isn't the amount of water? What if the problem is the bucket? That question is not welcomed, because questioning the bucket is questioning the entire system. It means admitting that effort was wasted, that exhaustion was unnecessary, that time was drained away, and that is hard to accept. But the question remains, and once it exists, it can no longer be ignored. Some begin to seal the hole. Others build different containers. Some slow the pace. Others rethink the path to the river. The system begins to change, slowly, not because the river changed, but because the design changed. And then something unexpected happens. With less loss, less effort is needed. With less effort, time remains. With time, choices emerge. The village rediscovers something it had forgotten. It is not normal to live always exhausted. It is not natural to run all the time. It is not inevitable to lose almost everything along the way. The leaking bucket was never destiny. It was a decision, and decisions can be revised. This story was never just about water. It is about draining systems, about structures that leak value, about models that demand more and return less. It is about work that does not generate rest, about consumption that does not generate satisfaction, about time that slips away without being lived. As long as the bucket remains broken, it doesn't matter how many times the river is visited. The result will always be the same. And perhaps the most important question is not how to run faster, but why we are using a bucket that was never made to retain. Because the moment the hole is seen, the story changes, and everything begins to be rebuilt, and life finally stops leaking away.